we just have a couple more things, and then we're getting to the fun part of our presentation. So just get ready for that. So, well, the new member sign up has been active for much of the session, but if anybody would like to sign up, I'll make sure it's active again. Just give me a second, and I'll make sure that's open. So you can go ahead and just find the polling section in your app and sign up. And honestly, if you don't quite get to that and want to sign up, it's easy to do. Just reach out to one of us and we can make it happen. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do a moderated open discussion for the group. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to try this. We're going to use the social Q&A. You probably all saw it while you're doing some polling earlier. So if you open up your app and go to the social Q&A, you can enter a topic for our discussion among the group. And then as the topics come in, you can upvote any of the topics as well. So let me just see if I can get that up there. So I see a couple of you are looking at it, trying to think of a topic. So maybe we'll get some topics here. Take your time. All right, they're starting to come in. If you think back to the discussion earlier today when you were in groups, you might have some leftover topics from there that you might want to nominate that we can explore together as a group. This is the last thing on our agenda today anyway, so we can take as much time as we want on this. It pays to be quick, according to this, because people like that managing IoT devices question, which was the first one up there. I like the second one that's trending so far. So, all right, good. So thanks everybody, and you go ahead and continue. We'll keep this live for a while. Uh-oh, we have a new leader. All right, so that's a good start. I'll keep it live and I'll keep it up there. But the number one pick is a really interesting choice, I would say. How do you manage expectations versus reality of leadership? The reality of leadership, I guess, is the question here versus expectations. So we have over a dozen people who want to comment on this, so I'll open it up to you. And can we get some mics around as well? All right.
Just to make sure, Greg, you're looking for volunteers from the audience to answer the question, right?
Well, we have, no, what we have is a topic for discussion of how do you manage expectations versus reality of leadership. So maybe somebody who's voted for this can start the discussion or start talking about what they would like to learn from the group about this. So anybody, looking for anybody? Here's one. It's a popular topic.
I mean, I think we're just challenged, right? There's this hype, right? And you think about there's a lot of hype around smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, what it's going to do and what it's going to achieve. There's the reality, and if it's done well, and if your company's in the right place, I'm sure that you can achieve well. But I think for some of us in older legacy manufacturing companies, it's a slower, smaller, incremental process, and there's a struggle with getting leadership to understand what it takes to really get to where they want to be, and that the investment's going to take time, right? So how do people really think about that? How do we articulate that? How do we communicate that and keep the resourcing and funding around the project to keep it going and keep it successful? So I guess that's kind of where my thought was.
Okay, let me follow up before we have the next comment on it, and that is, I just want to make sure I understand how you're using the term leadership there. Are you thinking about the C-level folks? Are you thinking about your boss? Are you thinking about you? So, so why haven't you made that 30% for me yet? All right. Yep. Any comments or insight regarding this?
This is Jonathan. I think from my perspective, I can kind of answer this in maybe a couple different ways. So one of the things that I've done is, with some different people in leadership, they're kind of looking for that shiny object, right? And you talk about handling the people at the golf course, and I've had the president of the company or business unit come to me and be like, hey, my friend over here says he has this new AI solution and he wants you to try it out, and yeah, we'll look into it. We're talking to him, but part of it is you kind of need to get them engaged, right? You need them to feed that change management piece, that sponsorship level. And so some of it is giving them a little bit what they want, and they kind of want to be excited. And so I think it's finding a couple pieces where you can deliver those pieces that are exciting. And so when I started out on this, right, we found that a lot of the value was just like on the statistical process control piece, just basic things that we've been doing for decades and decades, but being able to do it at scale and automating it. But it wasn't very exciting, and we didn't get a lot of super buy-in, but we started getting a couple proof of concepts of the machine learning piece, and that really ramped up things. And then people started, building more trust in us because we had some ROI backing, and then we were able to, they kind of put their faith in us, and we were able to get the funding and resources to start scaling. So that's some of my experience is being able to build trust enough and have some background of, hey, we've delivered these results and this is what I'm trying to scale. And then also having some pieces of thinking what's in it for them, right? So it's not just what's in it for the operators, but what's in it for the executive, right? So maybe they need something to share at the golf course.
We have one over here.
So I like Jonathan's answer. That was quite good. I would just add to that to rein in expectations, I try to build a relationship with our chief digital officer and then remind that officer, to some extent, digital transformation we talked about in our group of 12 is a rebranding of a lot of the same initiatives from the past. So I'll recall past history of initiatives that, with great fanfare, expected savings and benefits, achieved some moderate successes, but not it wasn't immediate, and the stuff that got sustained had to have a lot of sponsorship around it, as well as understanding scalability and having central resources of the organization brought to bear to make sure it was sustainable. So reminding people of past history, especially if you have good lessons learned from the past, draw attention to how difficult the digital transformation is, and working towards building sustainable solutions via harnessing of central resources to make it work and to make it last.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. I think the other side of that, though, is that this time digital transformation, it is a big thing, and maybe it's right for the companies to be expecting a big outcome, a transformation, not just an incremental improvement. So that's kind of the expectations part of the story, but part of it is you have to find a way to deliver in some regard. We have another comment.
Well, just too often, this quickly becomes a technology discussion. This isn't a technology discussion. This is an organizational change discussion. So reality is the leadership ready to have the courage to make the level of organizational change that's required to actually use the technology to make the change? And that's where most organizations get hung up, is they focus too much on the technology, not the requirements for decision rights and organizational change to embrace. Because you're getting ready, if you really do this, you're going to have to make a lot of changes. And sometimes, again, this expectation versus reality, it's like, again, it bogs down a technology discussion. It's not a technology discussion.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Makes a lot of sense to me. The notion of, it's easy to fall back into the old patterns of, small goals and small outcomes, but maybe it's something bigger. I think there's a comment back here. I have difficulty seeing with the lights.
Yes, thank you. Peter Kwaspen, Shell. What I also saw in some of the projects in our company is as soon as you all leave it to data science, and then the connect between data science and the real expertise of people from disciplines disappears, then the reality of the viable solution also disappears quite quickly. So it's extremely important to, in my opinion, to keep people involved that really understand the subject, and you can apply digitalization and bring in as many data scientists as you want. But as soon as you do not keep the connection with people that really understand what you're trying to solve, then that disconnect is going to show, and people in the business are starting to deviate from that particular approach and not believing it anymore.
Okay, thanks. Another comment on this side?
Thank you. I don't think I have an answer yet, but when I was asked to take the business transformation leader role in our organization, many mentors I reached out to told me one thing: this could be a career-ending move. That was 20 months ago. I'm still surviving, barely. But during this 20 months, one thing I learned is managing the expectations. We are in a pioneering technology process. Digital transformation is not established yet. It's still forming. We're going west. We don't know if we'll find a canyon or a mountain or a river. We're figuring out our way. So when I took that role, that was an expectation that we discussed. And the only promise we gave was there will be failures, there will be successes. We'll keep you engaged as long as we, I think, keep the leadership and the grassroots level, whoever is going to affect it by transformation, which is everybody in the company. Keep it in front of them. Keep it real. Failures happen, and if it is career ending, we'll find another career somewhere.
All right.
So, Jan Arnold Cavestro, one comment on that, that what I see too often is that we have a culture of people who just want to check the box. Say, yes, I've accomplished that. I check the box to move on to the next thing, and they call it a success. So we're trying to promote transparency. So every time I give an update on where we are, I'll remind them, okay, we have 200 data models and 50,000 assets. So we're just barely starting, but here's what we see. And trying to make sure that people understand that we're just at the beginning of actually scaling and making it successful. And those people who are only checking the box, making sure that somehow there's a path to getting their box checked and actually rolling it out. And I think that's a big gap in many organizations.
Hello, Todd Anslinger with Chevron. I think that most people here probably feel like Dilbert works for their company. So it's the old adage, if you don't know what it takes to do, it must take a really short time to do. All right, a lot of leadership is in that standpoint. Something that came up with me actually just this week, and it's around communication. So Jonathan said, share the vision and also communicate frequently. For instance, something came up with me last week. Okay, we're putting out our KPIs for this year. One of those KPIs was scale 3 IoT solutions to the enterprise. So obviously, the leadership doesn't understand the process of scaling something in a federated, company. I can't, unless they want to put up the money to fund that to scale it for the enterprise. Each business unit, one of 50 business units has to scale that. So a lot of it's communication. I agree with what you said. So that's the check mark, the Dilbert answer. I want to do this, check mark, we're going to do that. So, but it's a lot of understanding, as leadership may not understand what it takes to either have the infrastructure laid to do that or to actually buy devices, in this case, an IoT solution.
Barbara Miggle with Dow. My boss gave me some of the best feedback I ever got on this issue. He asked me about digital transformation. It was something that I was really passionate about. I said, yeah, if we work really hard on this and get the right proper resources, et cetera, we could be done in 10 to 15 years. And he says, we'll never start. You say that, we're just not going to start. And it's the right answer, because management's not going to be here in 10, 15 years either. They don't care what we can do in 10 to 15 years. They need to know what we can do in the timeline that they're going to see results, where it's going to impact their bottom line. And so what I learned is not to say we'll be done in 10 to 15 years, which is the honest to God answer. But I've said in 3 months we can do this. In 6 months we can do that. And try to deliver against that, and then say, and we will eventually get to this state, without talking too much about that 10 to 15 years anymore.
Smart. All right. Okay, so we can move to another topic. We've got quite a list here. So the next one that got the votes is how do people manage IoT devices? I think we have a volunteer right over here.
I put that one up, so I'll start it off. And as we've been looking at IoT, most vendors talk about data analytics and not the thing, the actual IoT, the thing part. And then for us in General Mills, we have, a lot of people think of PLCs as things, or IoT, right? So if we think about how much time we spend managing just the firmware and making sure everything's right on those 800 devices or whatever, I think we have like 800, something like that, maybe more. Anyway, 800 servers. Anyway, if you scale that up, who's thinking about how I'm going to manage all those IoT devices? I need to do a firmware update. How am I ever going to do that if I multiply 800 by 10 or 100?
All right. That sounds like a good topic. Who wants to chime in? Okay, not everybody jump up at once.
I don't have the answer to how you manage it, but I think it's absolutely something you need to solve, obviously, before you scale, because we have lots of pilots in this space as well, and I ask the same questions because we struggle to have any idea what's in our, say, 3,000 PLCs we've got out in the field versus, like you said, all this sometimes very, let's just say, niche products they want to put out into the field, which aren't necessarily, or don't necessarily even have the capability to be calibrated to check whether they're right, to check they're sort of one-off solutions that are going to deliver a result supposedly for a specific purpose. Now, if there's any value in doing that, I see it as maybe something in my head that I'm trying to avoid, but they're pilots more than anything, because if it works, then we should probably do it the proper way and go back and integrate it with all our systems and start from the bottom stack up, because it might be useful for safety, or it might be useful for plenty of things that we might not have thought of initially in the IoT case that we started with, I suppose. And that's what we find ourselves in a lot. And that's the path we're sort of going down, which is IoTs deployed to a site to enable piloting and proving of concepts fast and quickly and easily. And then we productionize that into the asset to manage it like any other asset.
Hello, Chair Clement. So my first thought to that was, and it's pretty much it's not even just IoT, it's pretty much any kind of digital transformation or anything you're going to do that's different. You go always back from the pneumatic days to putting in PLCs and putting in DCSs. It's like, well, who's going to manage all this stuff? Well, if what you're doing isn't making your process faster, better, or requiring less people to manage it, then you shouldn't be doing it, most likely. So really, it's about retraining your workforce so that they have different skills, so that some of the skills that you don't need anymore, which are some more of the manual things that automation has solved, are now doing other things. And so that's my first thought in terms of philosophically, where the people come to manage things.
This is Jonathan again. I think I have an opinion on all these things, but for the way we're handling these devices, my background's actually, I'm a double E in instrumentation, and then started out in maintenance, kind of doing this, maintaining these devices. And what I found was we had kind of this culture where if these sensors, allowed us to keep running and keep the plants operational, then they were put as a priority. If they were just some data gathering, right? And let's say you had a flow meter and the flow meter kind of got offset by 20%. Can you still run? Yes. Okay, who cares? It's offset by 20%. And sometimes we'd leave that for 20 years, left like that. And then we come in with these analytics tools and we say, oh, well, we see this huge outlier over here with this flow meter. That flow meter hasn't worked in 20 years. And so there's a complete culture change around treating data like a strategic asset. And so once you're able to do that, which is maybe 10, 15 years from now, but we're handling it one by one. And so our big project initiative is actually not going and saying, hey, we're going to fix all your instruments first before we start doing these things. We're kind of just starting and saying we're going to use the data you have, and then we're going to teach you to say and show you that, oh, these models would work a lot better if you fix this flow meter and this level transmitter, and then let the site go do that.
So I would say you're talking about data of a device that exists today. I'm talking about Internet of Things that are new devices that are smart, low cost, easily deployed. And there's a data part, right? That's the part that we want. But there's also a firmware. There's something that smart device is running on that's connected to my network, which is then connected into whatever, right? So there's a whole cybersecurity thing, and I don't want to go down that too far, but that's going to be a risk, right? So I can buy this $14 ESP 32 whatever and put a temperature sensor on it, and boom, I can have temperature for $100 versus the 2,000 to tie it into a PLC. And so that allows me to get some piece of information I couldn't do before. So there's value there. But I can't be short-sighted enough to say, oh yeah, put 100 of those things out there, and then somebody's going to say, oh, we have to update those. So I'm looking for that, because I get tons of people that talk about IoT Hub and the data and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, that's great, but somebody's going to have to manage this device for long. And I haven't heard many people or vendors come back and say, well, here's our plan. As well as, I'm not going to tie myself to one sensor manufacturer, right? So what's the... Anyway, so that's the big thing that we're doing POCs, and we're like, yeah, we're going to prove the value of the data, and then somebody's going to have to say, well, okay, how are you going to manage that device?
How well do you manage your PLCs today?
Oh. So if it's recording, we do an awesome job managing our PLCs. Yeah. No, I would say in North America, and that's part back to the standards, right? Like we're Rockwell in North America, and we do a great job. And we have specific software that talks to all those devices and kind of scans the network and goes down to the IO networks and does all that stuff. So that's one vendor that we've standardized on. And so we do a really good job on the PLC side. I'm just scared when we open it up to everything else.
Sorry, keep forgetting. Sorry, we're recorded. I love ARC. You put those tools in place, right? Well, you got to put the same tools in. I mean, there's tools from the IT side to go out and do management of deployments and patching and all that other stuff, right? They're out there. There's, Docker type tools, things like that you can go and help push, right? Depending on what you do. You got to look for those, I guess, if you want to maintain the same standards, you got to deploy things in the same standard fashion. But then, what happens to your cost model?
Mark, I think there's one behind you as well.
I'm assuming I'm allowed to share this, but we one way to get around it, which is what we have done, I suppose, is develop the hardware in-house from firmware and the hardware all the way up. So we've got our own hardware. We leverage the software and we leverage the protocols in the industry, but we manage the firmware. We manage the updates. They're self-discoverable. We manage the solution on top to discover and monitor the health of them all, where they're at, what's going on in that space. And that way, we deploy low-cost, self-made devices out into the field that have things like Spark Plug B communications going up through MQTT and things like that. And we can plug any sensors in out in the field, from a CAN bus to an instrument to a dust sensor out in the middle of nowhere. But we're trying to manage it anyway from doing it ourselves. Now, that involves the whole life cycle then of supporting that ongoing, which we have to figure out, but that's how we've solved it, because otherwise, like you said, there's no real way on the market that I've seen to do it at the moment.
Okay, there's right behind you again, Mark. Pretty soon you'll be out the door.
I got to ask, are we the only company that then starts moving these around and redeploying them so that they're not, it's not just a matter of keeping up with the firmware, you got to keep up with the location. And yeah, it's a huge issue. It used to be, that these measurement devices were expensive and hardwired, and you kept track of them. They were on your P&IDs even, but now it's just like they're everywhere and they're moving and they're getting out of control in a big hurry. I totally agree.
Wow. Okay. Any other thoughts about this topic, or shall we move on to another one?
Just one. It's also a question of how suitable those devices, those IoT devices, are for the actual process containments that you will put them on. What if your sensor that you put on your process containment shows up as a threat to the installation of that containment itself after a couple of years? So there's still a lot of things that we are trying to discover before we actually throw in a lot of those sensors in our process installations.
Okay, thanks. Joe?
So I think that's a great point. And so one of the things that we're looking at for IoT isn't to monitor something that's going to be mission critical or some of these things, but in the food world, for us, sometimes we'll put a line in and we hope it's around for 2 years, right? Because people's tastes change and we have this great idea about, I don't know, orange, vanilla, yogurt, and we're going to put a new line in and then people don't like it, so we have to rip it out. So for us, there's a piece there that our industry is just different than other industries, right? And if we were doing like, I think chemical and all that kind of stuff, we would be looking at things very differently than we do.
Okay, thanks. So somebody help me out with this next one, because who sponsored the different examples of resources, center of excellence, and roles and responsibilities question?
Here we go again. So this is my question, and it's the same question as the question that's below it, I believe. But I'm just kind of curious to hear from different people in the room, where are they part of a group, or how their company is structured, and what things are they handling, what roles and responsibilities around digital transformation? Do they have a data analytics group? Do they have a robotics group? And I've heard different models from some companies, but I just kind of like to hear from the room of we're trying to figure out how do we support this thing globally, and how many resources do we need maybe at the site level to be specific experts in it, or is it better to have more, center of excellence at the corporate group, and just trying to get some ideas.
Oh, since my title is IoT Center of Excellence, I guess I should answer that. From a Chevron standpoint, what they do is when a new technology comes on, they spin up a center of excellence. So, cloud center of excellence, high performance computing, data science, UAVs, IoT. And what they do there is they staff up a team in the center. My team is like 8, 10 people. Data science is like 40, 50. But the thinking is you staff up people to really go deep in the technology, learn about it, and then we have to train the 50 different business units that we support on, IoT, data science. So the thinking is, as you spin it up, it stays active for 5, 6, 7 years. And then by then it should be baked into the business units to where everyone else has that organizational knowledge now of how IoT data science works. And then the center of excellence kind of goes away.
And we have over in the corner here.
I work for a pharmaceutical company. And so in the manufacturing division, we did stand up a separate digital office. It's kind of small, 3 to 5 people. They act as cheerleaders. They hold regular sessions. They help with funding. But really the resources are, from the operating units and the technology units, parts of people's time, with the understanding that there is a company directive to drive towards digital initiatives. We also have and always had a math, science, statistics COE. There's about 10 people there, and they've been staffing up to support a lot of the analytics projects. And then several people in the business, me included, we were given additional responsibilities to drive digital transformation, digital technologies into the business. So it's still just a part-time role for many, many people.
Okay, anybody else want to talk about how they're organizing to deal with some of these issues? Okay.
Somebody else have an organization around this?
So does, like a center of excellence, does anybody have an organization for digital transformation? Here's one right in the middle. Paul, can you grab that one?
Okay, I'll go ahead and answer here. We're doing a little of everything. It's exhausting. So we have a digital transformation council or digital governance body at the executive level. We have center of excellence in all the different areas in marketing and in supply chain and in manufacturing, which is my area. And we're working on putting together a competency center, which is between the process experts and the technology experts to try and add value there. But when I think of roles and responsibilities, I think of the end user, those operators or maintenance hands who are going to be using this, and what do they need to make it successful, and how do we define their role so they actually use it and it doesn't get ignored. I think that's the part that we're struggling with right now.
Okay, right here and then in the back.
Hi, Kevin Wilhelm with Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical. So we have intentionally not done a center of excellence model because we want to have fast, many experiments at our site level. You had mentioned maybe 50% failure rate. Once we see a pattern there, then we may spin off, I'll call a mini center of excellence around a topic, robotics, data analytics, that sort of thing. We feel like that's the best balance between moving quickly, exploring these areas around POCs. We see enough of a pattern, then spin up a mini COE as opposed to having one big COE and getting bogged down in that initiative. The thing I would say is the biggest challenge is for us is explaining that strategy to various parts of our leadership, because they're like, where's your strategy? And we're like, well, our strategy isn't our execution model. And they're like, well, that's not a strategy. And we've been going roundy on that. It says it is a strategy. It's just not what you think of as an over-encompassing vision. That's been the biggest challenge with it.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jesus Flores, and I am part of Lindy. So Lindy Digital, so we have a digital organization, and we also have a Center of Excellence. So the Center of Excellence is divided in many different verticals, and the role is really promote best practices and oversee not only digital part, but any other type of technology. So in Lindy Digital, we do many different things as well. We are divided in many different segments, and there is just collaboration.
Okay, so we have some common themes and some different approaches as well. So, I mean, we can keep this conversation going as long as you want. I think maybe we can tackle the next one here, and then we can decide if we want to do some more. So so it's an interesting question, this one with 11 votes. Are we repackaging things that we already do and calling it digital transformation? So who thinks we're doing that?
I sure hope we are, is all I can say. If we haven't been in the process of digital transformation for the last 20 years, what have we been doing? And, we need to build on what we've already done, not tell people that what we've been doing for the last 20 years was, not, of no value.
Okay.
So, yeah, I absolutely agree that's what we're doing.
I like that.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think we are, I mean, not everything, right? But, if you think about the quality era that happened in the early 90s with SPCC and all that, the big influence on that. I mean, think about what we're doing now with some of the other tools that they talked about today. It's some of that same methodology, but it's at a much higher level. And I think more sustainable because it's the tools do a lot of it for you once you program them.
Okay.
Well, again, Jesus Flores. Yeah, I totally agree, right? So we were doing the digital transformation before it was calling digital transformation. So certainly not everything, but there are a lot of components.
Yeah. So while we're getting to the next couple, we all know it, but is that really what you want to say to your CEO? Sure, we got this. We did it 20 years ago. I don't know. Over here.
All right. So since I put that question up there, I do agree. I think we are doing this. I think there's and I'm gonna kind of, now that I'm talking, by the way, Keith DeShary, BASF. I'll kind of answer some of these other questions that I didn't respond to. But one of the things I think we have to be careful of with this repackaging, and I'll just leave it calling it that, is we started to, and within BASF, I mean, we talked about support mechanisms and structures. Well, early last year to mid last year, we created an organization within BASF globally that is nothing but digitalization. That organization is fairly big. We have sections of it in each of the regions, one in North America as well. But the problem we get into as this organization gets bigger is they get further away from the production floor. And I'm just, because we're trying to manage this internal, I'm just kind of giving a warning shot as you build either a center of excellence or anything around this repackaging. Because what happens is you start to lose sight of solving problems or issues, and you get more into just pushing technology. And it's something that we're trying to battle right now since we created this huge organization within BASF globally that is no other task except digitalization. And a lot of the concepts get kind of, the repackaging concepts get kind of messed over because of an organization that's kind of like, I want to kind of say sitting in a silo versus actually actively working in the field. And then when you come to looking at it and you look at the repackaging initiative, when you talk about managing the IoT devices, well, it's already there. I mean, we've been at BASF, we've been using, wireless sensors for years for reliability. And we've been applying these things and we've been moving them and we track them and we move them to different devices depending on the needs of the different production units. So a lot of this is, the management of it, the sensors, is the same as the manager of the sensors that weren't wireless before. That's who's managing them. It's the same way. I mean, a question to ask everybody in here, and this kind of goes back to the sensor level when you deal with that, is how many of you in this room in your companies do not really manage all the data you can get out of current instrumentation? I'll use micromotion meter, for example. How many of y'all are actually utilizing every bit of data you can get out of there? And when I say that, are you taking that into an analytical mindset and using that data at that forefront? It's just a question to ask yourself within your company before you go too far down a path of working in the silo.
Okay.
To answer the question about the repackaging of digital transformation, Sam Foyer, Fire Visions and Drama.
Sorry.
Yeah, one thing on that I like to tell our staff is that, yes, this is what we've been doing for 20 years, just the computing power has caught up to what we dreamed of that it could do. That now we have the computing power to actually do the things we have. To address a little bit about the staffing issue, there was a slide, I don't remember if it was in this session or another, that had about what is digital transformation, and it had about 25, 30 different topics. And diluting our resources across those 30 topics gets us a little bit frustrated on it. So to repackage it, calling it digital transformation, and to say, yes, now the computing power is there, now we need to see what we can build up in our organization to take advantage of that.
Thanks. Joe?
So I'm going to agree and disagree, right? Because I think you brought it up. If it's a transformation, it's not doing what we were doing, right? It needs to be a step change thing. So the way I sometimes think about this is, am I replacing a steam engine with an electric motor, right? So I'm getting more efficiency or something like that, but I'm still running belts all over to do all this stuff. Or am I really taking advantage of the new technology to do things differently? So again, I would go to the real world example, and I like to go with Industry 4.0 is additive manufacturing, right? That is something new, that is something different in our plants, that they can do something very different than what they could do before. And so that's transformational to me. So while we do a lot of the same stuff with like talking about data, I think there's other technologies that are going to drive kind of a different way of doing things, or I couldn't do them before. Computing power, right, with machine learning and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be kind of differential, right? Because I used to be able to get data on downtime on my machines, but can I pass that to somebody that's really smart and give me insight? I think that is differential versus just having to comb through a whole bunch of data. And so I think it's the same, but it has to be transformational, or we should be thinking of it that way.
I would say that for the repackaging terms, I mean, I agree with everybody. Everybody needs to Google a term called the AI effect. And so I'll share it with you real quick. It's basically, what's the definition of AI? And they define AI as anything that we aren't currently doing. So, maybe the Roomba in the early 2000s was AI, but now it's just, Roger with the sensors, and it gets stuck on the carpet. And you even think about like Alexa, would you consider that AI? And they had an algorithm called Eliza back in, I think, the 60s or so that did the same thing, voice recognition, answered questions, responded. But to me, this kind of ties back in the very first question, right, of getting the leadership involved. And so there is some marketing strategies going on here, and you have to be smart about leveraging those and be appropriate with them. But there's a big opportunity to take some of these issues that, me from being an instrumentation engineer starting out is I always wanted to fix these flow meters, but people didn't care about it. And so now you have an opportunity and another platform to help drive some of these things that maybe we've been doing for decades. But you can get, if you frame it in the right way and fit it into the right goal, you can get it into a priority for your leadership. And I think that's real valuable.
Great. One over here.
I agree with everything I heard about how we may be repackaging. Humans always have been improving things, and we can't call every improvement a transformation. And I agree with the definition of the transformation being something drastically different from what we were doing before. And if you're not able to define that, whether to a management, a C-suite, or a layman, I think we probably need to question what the transformation is, what we're doing. Are we doing transformational things, be it digital or business transformation? I think the distinction here, we are a very small company. Some of the things we do probably won't scale for multinational, multi-plant companies, but the definition of transformation, if you look back at the recent past, it's scale and speed. We're doing the same things, but if you're doing it at a different scale and different speed, that it transforms how you do business, how you do your daily work. That's transformational. And at an industry level, we need to be able to define how are we doing at scale and at speeds that we need to be transformational, that the operator, like John presented, how is it making a difference to the operator's life? If it's changing his life from looking at those charts early morning at 5 o'clock for an hour to know what is working and what's not working, to a place where it'll tell him what's not working, that's transformational for him, and we all probably owe it to ourselves to be able to define that more clearly.
Okay. I mean, for what it's worth, some of the input I've had over the years on this topic include things like, if it's not a transformational goal, if it's just an incremental improvement that you're after, you might have a hard time getting the budget, because the answer may come back, you want to do it a little better, just do it, don't spend money. But if you have a transformation, it comes to maybe the marketing comment that Jonathan was making earlier. There may be more funds. It may be a little harder to deliver, but just to close it up to the other gentleman's comment as well, we have the computing capability today that we didn't have when we had many of these visions a long time ago, but could never quite come close to them. Now we can maybe more than come close. We can deliver on them and then some. So, we have time to do another one if you're interested. So let's do one more. How do you integrate machine learning and engineering physics-based models? Okay, we'll put this one here. Yeah, no? Does anybody want to talk about that? Yeah?
So certainly, well, I think that is tied up with the previous question, because that has been done, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, right? So a lot of control theory and a lot of statistic theory towards the combination of physics-based models and machine learning. Now we can see that certainly there are a lot of more technologies out there that can expedite or speed the integration of these models, but really the basics are there since many years ago. And I guess also depends on when we say transformation, right? Coming back to the previous question, depends on in the companies, depends the degree of maturity of each company, and inside each company there are many verticals usually. So There are some areas in which you have a lot of technology and you are already, you have been doing the transformation for a long time, and there are other ones that, other areas in which you have to start from industry 3.0, right, to build on that. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but again, a lot of has been done in the past.
So do we have some passion in the room about this question? Another comment, maybe? Jonathan?
Yeah, I think you probably need to, if you're really wanting to. I mean, this is a question, right? Of trying to take a technology down to solve a problem, right? As opposed of like, looking at it from the problem aspect. But you need to look in Google, the different categories of machine learning, because machine learning is a very super broad term. And so I use it a little bit as a marketing strategy. But we in the chemical industry really focus on just a couple fundamental algorithms called principal component analysis and partial least squared. Things that have been around since the 50s, and we've been doing them in the back office, maybe with R&D folks since then. But now you can do it at scale, and you saw how I kind of demonstrated what we're doing is kind of looking for nuances in the data and then presenting them, and then allowing kind of your people to take it from there. And I'm sure with lots of things, we've had on one of our flares. For the last 8 years, we've bought this software that measured and optimized the natural gas flow going to the flare, and it was using some type of black box neural network algorithm that we bought from a company. And so but nobody really was interfacing with it, and we didn't really scale that. But I think you just have to look at what problem you're having to solve, and maybe what are other people in the industry using, or what have you done really well in your own company.
Okay, thanks. Mark, over to your right.
This is Kevin. I'm with Chevron. I can just share my observation both internationally and domestically, and where we've seen some evolution in this space is my observation, and I think some others in the company, is the data science skill set is heavily IT out of school. They're very knowledgeable on machine learning, fuzzy logic, neural networks, all these principles that you can use for big data sets and how to correlate them. The most success that we've seen is where we pair that data science set sitting with our petrotechs. So our chemical engineers, our facility engineers. We've seen example after example, both intern in the company and outside the company, where IT has applied those techniques to a physics-based problem. They'll find correlations, but they don't match the physics. So we're trying to shuffle that model a bit and say, put our data science capability with our engineering function, with our operations function. To your point earlier, they also understand the field. So it's really a cross-functional application, I think, to do this successfully in any industry.
Okay. All right, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. So thanks, everybody. Just a couple of closing remarks. We, have recorded this meeting, so we'll place that in the library for members. And we'll also provide a meeting summary. We'll use those topic results to guide our online and regional meetings, as well as ARC's research. And we have an online meeting in March, on March 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, please find the survey link in the description of this session, and please take the survey. Welcome to all the new members. We got almost a couple of dozen new members signed up during this session, so thank you for that, and welcome. We'll make sure you get online in our group and get access, so we'll put you on our mailing list and such. So that's all great. We also got a number of nominations for steering committee members, so we'll be going through the process that Mike described to finalize that and have some formal elections in a few weeks. So with that, thanks everybody, and we're going to wrap it up. There's a reception, starts at 6 o'clock off the main lobby near the registration desk. So go in there. There'll be drinks and food and and some booths with suppliers to show you some interesting stories. So thanks again for coming.